All right, hello. I'm Paul Whitkay, founder of the Alliance of Chief Executives. We've been bringing leaders together since 1996 to share our collective knowledge, experience, wisdom, and ideas to help all of our leaders learn faster, move more quickly and confidently to achieve our visions. When COVID hit in 2020, we were all forced to learn how to use Zoom. And in the process, we gained the ability to bring leaders together from around the world at the same time. As a result, we launched our series of Alliance Visionary Leaders Roundtables, in which we discuss the innovations and challenges that affect all of us. In past roundtables, we discussed the future of transportation and mobility, energy and the environment, food and agriculture, the built environment, and others. And today I'm excited to welcome to our latest discussion of the future of health and healthcare, something that clearly affects all of us currently and in our future lives. We are privileged today to be joined by an amazing panel of leaders who are driving innovation and change in various sectors of life sciences and healthcare. And we're going to begin with introductions from these leaders, and then they will give their individual perspectives of how they see the world 5 or more years from now and how that's going to be different from the way it is today. And then we'll go into an interactive conversation with the panel, and then also addressing as many questions from all of you as we can get to. You are free to put them into chat if you have questions, and we'll try to get to the ones that appear to have the most impact and most interest. After that, we will, in 90 minutes, go into private groups where each of you have the opportunity to discuss your own questions, issues, opportunities, and initiatives in the field of health and healthcare. So with that, let's get started. John, Virtual Decisions, tell them about yourself.
Well, good morning, everyone from Pleasanton in the East Bay of San Francisco. It's nice to be with you today. I've known Paul for north of 15 years or so, I think. So it's nice to be sharing this today. I'm originally from London. I came to the US in '89 and did a decade in aerospace in things like avionics and gas turbine engines, and then went into life science, the tools and diagnostics and medical device for about another decade. And then I completed a couple of middle market CEO roles. And it was back in 2008 when I first got my exposure to surgical robotics as a supplier to the pioneer in that field in Intuitive Surgical. So, but now I've been CEO of Virtual Incision for 12 years. I joined the co-founders there, and we're working on a little robot in the inside instead of big robots reaching in from the outside. So it's a 2-pound robot instead of a 2,000-pound robot for soft tissue and solid organ surgeries, abdominal procedures. And nice to be with you all.
Thank you. So Minesh of Hippocratic AI.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Paul, thank you for having us. So my name is Minesh Bhimani. I'm one of the co-founders and chief medical officer at Hippocratic AI. I am an emergency medicine physician by background, originally from Northern California, not far from where John is in Palo Alto. Spent 7 years out in Baltimore for my medical school and residency training. Worked clinically for many years in Northern California before moving to hospital administration as a chief medical officer, and then more recently as chief operating officer. My last role was at El Camino Health before we started Hippocratic. At Hippocratic, we are using generative AI to create a solution that we hope will solve the staffing shortage that we're seeing in healthcare, both nationally and what we're finding internationally, by having autonomous patient-facing clinical conversations. So, developing a safety stack to unleash kind of autonomous phone conversations with patients. So it's nice to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Bill Newell of Sutro Biopharma.
Thank you, Paul, and good day, everyone. My name is Bill Newell. I'm the CEO of Sutro Biopharma. I've been in the biotechnology industry since 1998 with a career focus on bringing innovative medicines to patients and primarily cancer patients. Sutro Biopharma was founded in 2003. I joined in 2009 as the 19th employee. Today, we're about 350 employees working on next generation cancer therapeutics, for which we use our cell-free protein synthesis technology, which is unique in the industry, to design better antibody drug conjugates, which we think are an important modality for the treatment of cancer. I'll talk more about that later on today. We've got a pivotal trial ongoing for women with late-stage ovarian cancer, as well as the same targets expressed in a rare form of pediatric AML. We have a number of collaborations ongoing, and we're really trying to make medicines that have a better therapeutic index so that patients get more benefit from the drug and at the same time have less or fewer side effects.
All right, thank you. Mary from Incentro.
Great to be here, and good morning, everyone. So I'm Mary Rosenman. I'm the CFO and CBO of Incentro. I'm an organic chemist, chemical biologist by background, then spent some time at McKinsey & Company in New York, focused on the intersection of pharma and corporate finance, was a venture and growth investor, and from that side of the table, joined one of my portfolio companies to grow it, professionalize it, take it public. That company was called Immune Therapeutics, and we developed the first ever drug for peanut allergy. That drug was approved and the company was acquired by Nestle, at which point I essentially became obsessed with the idea that computational approaches were going to fundamentally transform how we discover and develop medicines, and having a feeling that we were really on the cusp of a revolution in the application of those approaches to the growing amounts of both human data that we were starting to gather on people like all of us on this call and patients across the healthcare system through imaging and omics and genetics, as well as the high throughput biology revolution that was allowing us to model disease and generate vast amounts of similar omics, imaging and genetic data in the lab. What we do at Incentro is we really leverage that to build predictive models that help us uncover novel genetic drivers and novel intervention points in disease, including diseases that we really don't understand today. Those form the basis of a therapeutics pipeline that is rapidly advancing towards the clinic in our core areas of metabolic disease and neuroscience.
All right, thank you. Ditcho from Version.
Hello, everyone. Good to meet you all and good to be here. I am a mathematical physicist by training. I'm one of the 3 co-founders of Version. We started the company back in 2002, and it's been a long journey toward really trying to make a difference in how we design small molecule drugs. Being able to explore completely new chemical space than what people have been able to explore so far using high throughput screening. Really on the computer be able to drive de novo design of new molecules with unique therapeutic profiles for a range of major diseases. We use these quantum physics breakthroughs that we built in-house, along with our own proprietary AI tools to design these drugs. And we are developing now a range of medicines across cardiometabolic disorders and cancers. We have a growing pipeline. We're a clinical stage company, and we hope to really make a difference in many of these major diseases that affect humanity.
All right, thank you. Matai.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone. Matai Mammon here. I began as part of an MD PhD program at Harvard, working with George Whitesides in chemistry, physics, that interface, and my medical degree from Harvard through the HST program. I went on to found a company called Theravance in South San Francisco, and it was there that I kind of grew up professionally through various roles, came to run their research and development. And through that, we discovered some pretty phenomenal medicines, including in the respiratory space, Brio, Anoro, and Trelegy, and 2 other medicines. I went on after about 15 years there to run a lot of the research at Merck, And it was broad-based, and proud of what we've done both on the immuno-oncology side and on the cardiovascular side. And then went on more recently in the last 6 years to run the research and development group at Johnson & Johnson. And very proud of the team we built, and launched 9 medicines that I think are had the potential to be really transformative. And in the last year, I took a role as the CEO and chairman of a company called Fog Pharma, and now just yesterday renamed Parabolis. And Parabolis, we focus on a whole category of targets in cellular systems that are not accessible to oral small molecules, so pills, nor are they accessible to injectables of today, like antibodies. And yet they drive a lot of very important diseases. In principle, that cuts across all medicine. We're focused initially on oncology. In particular, we have a program in the clinic that we believe might be the world's first really effective therapy for colorectal cancer. And that's very exciting, and we're working our way through all the ins and outs of that. Pleasure to meet you all.
Fantastic. And Jeff, you bring a perspective on a wide range of innovation. So tell us about yourself.
I think so. You know, I remember a panel where I was years ago, I was one of the 30 under 30 healthcare people in the United States, and I think I'm the oldest healthcare information technology guy still active out there. So, but my perspective I'll bring today on healthcare is as someone who's thinks about the healthcare system in total, that you as CEOs and leaders of companies face. You have employees that pay premiums for benefit plans and all the componentry that comes together to create that. That's been where my career is focused. I helped build the western part of the United States of what is now United Health Group. I then founded a company that became a public company called TriZetto, biggest company you never heard of, but it runs all the Blues, Aetna, Cigna, United, and so forth for how they do benefit plans, claims, pay providers, etc. Then I was the CEO of a company called WellTalk, which brought personalized solutions to consumers, meaning generally employees or beneficiaries of Medicare or Medicaid plans that help them with their daily living components of health. We'll talk about that more. Today, I sit on the boards of DNA Nexus, which is a multi-omics company, Trinetics, which is a pharma research assistance company to find patients for clinical trials, Brightside Health, which is a mental health care virtual company, Grin, which is an oral care company, and I'm a senior advisor to Blackstone, the big private equity firm for investments they make in the healthcare technology and services field. And it's great to be with you here from Newport Beach, California, where it's always 72 degrees and sunny.
Really? Very all right. So great panel, and just for your knowledge, Nadine Haram of Proximy was really hoping to be here today, but she had a personal issue he had to take care of, so she apologized for her presence, and we'll look forward to seeing the recording afterwards. So with that, let's get into visions, what we see for the future. And Matai, I'm going to start with you. So what do you see for 5+ years out there? How's life going to be different for us human beings?
Yeah, that horizon that you mentioned of 5 years is kind of important. Maybe I can do 5 to 10, just looking a little bit further out than that. And I won't focus on what my company does, because I think that there's one item that my company will eventually hopefully tackle along with the rest of the ecosystem that this one bothers me from a day-to-day standpoint. Our medicines right now in general are focused on diseases that are named ages ago, like decades or even centuries ago. And this has been a long-standing problem. We talk about having pneumonia or inflammatory bowel disease or various depression. And this kind of name or label for a condition is not mechanistically one thing. It's not mechanistically homogeneous. And that's probably one of the most troubling aspects of medicine today. And to me, it's fundamentally a data problem, but it's beyond a data problem. You can, in principle, imagine carving up all of diseases and conditions by mechanism. And I think that that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years as the work that Mary and team are doing at InCitro will contribute to that. Others on the call, I'm sure, working in areas that will contribute to that. But there's a sort of a societal problem beyond that, one of diagnosis. You've got to be able to use the right methods to be able to identify that patient as having a condition. I give you an example of what I mean here that's interestingly juxtaposed because they're both examples within infectious diseases. So within bacterial disease, we don't call a condition by the bacteria that causes it. We talk about having pneumonia, or we talk about having a bladder infection, or we talk about various parts of the body that have an infection of bacteria, but we don't name the bacterium. Hence, like if you give an antibiotic, you don't know exactly what you're treating. You're hoping you're treating the whole thing, but invariably it's a portion of what could be the underlying etiology. Interestingly, bacterial diseases have been around for a long time, and those were the conditions that were named centuries ago, actually. So that's the reason I think that there was no understanding of mechanistic basis of that disease. Viral disease, on the other hand, is a much more recent phenomenon. We've come to understand that viruses exist and they cause certain infections. And we no longer call those by the descriptive anatomic name, but we say, for example, that you have HIV. You don't have Kaposi sarcoma, or you don't have one of the other manifestations of having HIV infection. And so there, the medicines that we come up with as a result are very laser focused on that particular virus's life cycle, and we're able to very deliberately hurt that virus or keep it from replicating or eliminate it because it's a very specific etiology mechanistically. And that's true for HCV. It's true for many other infections that one might have right now. So it's very interesting. These are cultural issues. There are diseases that cut across normal medical subspecialties that are actually probably the same disease. So once the data problem, hopefully in the next 5, 8 years, say, becomes much clearer, and we're able to connect condition to medicine more reasonably and get the axes, if you will, for how to even think about medicine in the right way, then it becomes not a data problem, but rather one of diagnosis and acceptance by the practicing industry. And I'm not naive, and I think of that as a potentially decades-long enterprise that needs to be worked on. But until then, until that happens, we'll find ourselves prescribing medicines to patients that will not benefit, or only a subset of them will, and maybe not prescribing them to patients that would have otherwise benefited. So it's a very big, important societal problem. And there's this two-step piece, I think, that's data, and then driving that data and understanding into practice.
All right. Well, thank you for kicking it off. Let's stay with drug development area. Bill from Sutro, what's your vision?
Thanks, Paul. I have been focused for a lot of my professional career on cancer. And if we think about it, the field of cancer treatment has evolved dramatically over the last 50 years. In fact, the war on cancer was first declared by the federal government in the early 1970s. And I would say that only recently are we actually showing signs of being able to win the war on cancer. Chemotherapy was the first and initial mainstay of treatment, but we're actually poisoning the patient in order to save their life by attacking the cancer cells. But we also, with those chemotherapy drugs, poison and kill healthy cells as well. And so we've been trying to do a better job at that. And antibodies, which are more specifically targeted, have been the next mainstay of cancer therapy as well. But cancer cells are clever and able to find ways to avoid the mechanisms that are designed to disrupt and kill them. And so recently, recently, I mean, over the last 30 years or so, a new cancer modality called antibody drug conjugates have come to the forefront. This is a combination of a targeting antibody, so you get specifically to the tumor cells to the maximum extent possible, and a ultra-potent chemotherapy or payload that, if dosed as a traditional chemotherapy, would be too toxic to sustain. But when dosed in a targeted and limited manner, it is something that is quite effective. Today, we have about 13 antibody drug conjugates that have been approved globally. Over 200 are in development, and I think that underestimates the number of molecules that are in development as new cancer therapies. I think the ability to target a tumor cell preferentially, the ability to disrupt it, kill it, and have it removed from the body gives us hope that someday we're going to be able to replace chemotherapy with a better, safer, more targeted, and more effective therapy, and that's antibody drug conjugates. But cancer is not beaten by a single drug in most instances, a single medicine. It's usually a combination approach. And so what we are going to be seeing in the future is better antibody drug conjugates, better immunotherapy agents that allow the immune system to actually take over where the other medicine, the antibody drug conjugate, chemotherapy, or whatever modality you have, is not sufficient to do the job, but you get a 1-2 punch. And so I'm excited that we're finally on the cusp of realizing improved cancer control for patients. I'd love to say that we're going to be able to defeat cancer completely and we can envision a cancer-free world. I don't think that's achievable, certainly not in the next 5 to 10 years. But what I do think we will see is tremendous advances in making cancer a more chronic disease where patients move through a series of therapies that are effectively more targeted, better at keeping the cancer at bay, and better at giving the patient the quality of life so that it's not just a bedridden issue where they are not able to enjoy the extra time that we're able to give them with these medicines, but able to actually move forward in a way that gives them good quality of life, even at the end of their life. So I'm excited about the prospects for us as an industry. I've got fears about other things, but right now I'm going to say I'm excited about our ability to actually start to win the fight more and more against cancer.
Thank you. Thank you. John, let's go to you. Your perception and vision of the future of healthcare, but in your particular area, you're reinventing how surgery can be done.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'll definitely riff on the surgical robotics space here. I think just the virtual incision itself, I think we've got a fairly audacious mission. It's to make every operating room robot ready, and it's really built off this journey in surgery that went from open surgery to about 30 years ago into minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery, and then the pioneered robotics, soft tissue robotics work with Intuitive has been incredible. But now, it's maybe 10% of procedures in the US are on these kind of mainframe robotic systems. Maybe it's only 3% worldwide. And I think eventually that's going to flip. It will be, 90% of surgery done with a robot and 10% otherwise. So there's a big move here. But the areas I really want to focus on is that this little robot is spitting out 30,000 data items a second. We've got a modem in the console. We bring everything up to the cloud. We've got all this data. And actually, that's a huge, huge trend in medical device where basically every example coming to market these days also has a big data component. And there's two exciting areas, I think, ultimately in 5 years, 10 years, that type of journey, where these will come to really change surgery. And the first is certainly on the artificial intelligence side. And there I really think about ultimately getting to task automation of some sort, and then a whole range of co-piloting in the generative AI space as well. So maybe you're starting with things like just passing needles and advancing on that side, but there's a whole host of work that will be putting some of the most serious edge compute that you can available right there in the OR, doing intra-procedure feedback, really helping in these things. And then the other area, we put this little robot up on the ISS, and we did a nice little telesurgery demonstration with 6 surgeons down in Lincoln, Nebraska, are our headquarters. But in the next 5-10 years here, we think there's a chance where remote surgery really changes the delivery of care. Fully 1/3 of counties in the United States don't even have access to one surgeon, let alone a specialist surgeon. And we think this approach around a hub and spoke delivery of care enabled by mini robots that simplify the patient side of the equation so drastically could be a fantastic answer. So you have the specialist at the center, could be the patient in an outbound rural location, or it could be across town in Los Angeles, or from New York City up to Connecticut. There's or certainly OUS as well. So between mini robots, AI, and telesurge, I think those are the types of things you're going to see on the surgery front, Paul.
All right. Well, thank you. Mary Roseman, in Citro, what's your vision?
Well, Matai already teed it up. So thank you, Matai, for that. I mean, I think we are really in this incredible world of massive amounts of data starting to become available. And when I introduced myself earlier, I talked about the ability to use those data to identify novel genetic intervention points in disease. And I think we are going to end up in a world in that same 5 to 10 year time horizon that Matai described, where we really start to redefine entire categories of disease that we view as homogeneous today on the basis of uncovering underlying genetically aligned patient heterogeneity, and as a result, much better and more refined intervention points in those diseases. I'll give you an example. So, because I think we, as an industry, have been using the term precision medicine for a very, very long time. So I don't know what incarnation of precision medicine we're on today, maybe version 6 or whatever. Let me give you an example of in the cholesterol space. So in the early 2000s, there was a family identified with familial hypercholesterolemia. So they had really, really high LDL levels, and it was uncovered that they had a gain of function mutation in the PCSK9 gene. So there was a gene, they made an enzyme, and as a result of having that overexpressed in lots of that enzyme, they had really, really high lipid levels. Okay, so that's one generation of precision medicine. If you have that mutation, we are going to go and we are going to treat you in a particular way. But at around the same time, there was another thing that happened. There was another group of people that was uncovered that had a loss of function mutation in the same gene. And it was found that the loss of function mutation was protective, and they had really, really low lipid levels. Now, those are two very, very different experiences. In the first case, you have to go and treat that particular thing where it happens. In the second case, you actually have an insight into a potential intervention point in disease that could be usable in lots and lots of people to lower levels of lipids. Now, why aren't more things in that second category? Why don't we have insights on more protective loss of function mutations or other insights in disease that help us intervene better? It's because we're limited. We're not statistically powered with genetics that we have today, and we are moving towards a world with the combination of multimodal imaging data plus genetics plus generative AI and machine learning, where we can actually scale data and make those discoveries. So that is the vision that I have for the future, that by actually leveraging this revolution in more data, more compute, and high throughput biology to help us believe that these things that we're uncovering actually are going to work, we're going to have a completely different understanding of diseases that we don't understand today. Things like Alzheimer's disease, obviously not one. Things like heart failure and many other examples. So that's my very bold and audacious vision for the 5 to 10 year timeframe, and why.
All right. Thank you. Jeff, let's go to you. How do you see the world of healthcare in the future?
Sure. So I want to address it in a way. This call is full of CEOs. And we are about to re-enter a cycle that looks really familiar, where healthcare is too expensive. The cost increases you're seeing going into 25 are higher than what you've seen. And so what I want to start you with in thinking about this vision of the next 5 to 10 years is a equation that I've written 2 books, one called The Health Care Cure, and one called Not Just in Sickness, but Also in Health. But essentially, this is a simple equation. For every dollar you spend in healthcare, the way you determine if that dollar was well spent is you take the health status of an individual, think of yourself, or of a population, think of your employees, and you divide it by the cost of the inputs that it takes to achieve that health. Is it a bunch of really expensive interventions, or is it lower cost things that perhaps the employees and their families can control themselves? Because only about well less than 20% of what affects your health is clinical, either clinical quality or your genetics. Okay, I know that's hard to believe, but that's the case, well backed up in research, right? That brings us to, as we again think 5 to 10 years out, what I call 2-axis personalization. One of the axes is personalized medicine, which Matai and Mary and Bill and others have done a great job, of talking about. But what that really means is this world that we developed today. Just let's be really practical. You get an annual physical, you get a blood test. There are certain metrics against that blood test. You all know them, cholesterol, etc. You get your blood pressure taken, you get your temperature taken. This is small data, folks. This is like not really all that interesting, and it's pretty much been vetted out what can be done with that data so far. And so what you'll see over the next 5 to 10 years on that side is the development of omics. So your base level genome, which is your DNA, your RNA, and your single cell, which is more or less stable, but it mutates throughout your life. And then these other omics, the blood, proteomics, blood sugars, glucomics, how you ingest things, metabolomics. So you're going to start to see a shift where this larger omics data starts to be attached to and follow around what was your EMR, your electronic health record. In about 20 years, you're going to see a flip. It's going to take about 20, but over the next 5 to 10, you'll see that being added. So that's the dimension of personalized medicine. The other side is personalized daily living, the things that your employees and you can do to affect your health daily. Now, it's really interesting. GLP-1s right now, which can't get off the front page, is a nice little crossover way to think about it. GLP-1s make you eat less, make you drink less. They don't make you exercise more. And so you're actually in a world as employers where you're going to have these perverse incentives, expensive drugs that maybe substitute for what people should be incented to do on their own. But for each of us, because our daily living, our nutrition, our fitness, our mental health, our social health, our financial health are much bigger drivers of our total health. You're going to see benefit plans that lay out those pillars of health, and you should look for them as employers. And you should not get too overwhelmed with the science side of personalized medicine, because it takes about 7 years to diffuse these wonderful discoveries that others on this call are going to talk to you about. takes about 7 years to diffuse them into practice in the healthcare world.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Let's go to Manish of Hippocratic AI.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and so I think from my perspective, when we look at both the next few years and then the next 5 to 10 years, I think, initially, as Jeff mentioned, I think we're going to see this continuation of kind of our current trends, right? The demands on the health systems are going to rise. Our Medicare, Medicaid populations are going to rise. Expenses are increasing. Challenges across staffing and finding healthcare workers to fill gaps are widening. And at the same time, we're going to find that consumers or patients are going to demand more. I think as technology and data enables consumers, I think they are going to demand more what we call kind of personalized or even hyper-personalized care, as opposed to our current kind of paradigm of population or cohort-based care. But as we look kind of 5 years, 10 years down the road, I think what we'll see on the health delivery side is going to be really a large shift from the inpatient environment to care outside of the four walls. So acute care facilities, as we see them today, I think we're going to see a significant rise in acuity. As more low-risk care is kind of moved to the outpatient environment, I think we'll see an increase in surgical specialty facilities, kind of tertiary care facilities with high acuity diagnoses. I think a lot of what John is working on, I think we'll see advents in surgical technologies that'll enable kind of rapid recovery and a move to truly outpatient care for some of these procedures that currently require inpatient environments. And then we'll ultimately see more care at home and outside the hospital, I think through telehealth and various other technologies. I think generative AI being one of them. I think generative AI as a technology itself, I think across both kind of co-pilot and kind of the autonomous use cases, I think will play a large role in what we call kind of workflow efficiency, provider burnout, but ultimately, in access to care, health equity, and optimistically, I do think that we'll have this era kind of healthcare abundance 5 or 10 years down the road. And for the first time, we won't be limited by the cost or kind of ability to find staff, but really enabled and empowered to engage with patients based on what their needs are and focus on outcomes and interventions that we can engage in that will promote positive outcomes from a patient perspective. And I think health outcomes are much more than just the clinical aspects. I think there's a lot of non-clinical factors, as Jeff mentioned as well, that affect health outcomes. And now we'll have the ability to kind of change all of these. I think along with that, we are going to need to see a shift in payer reimbursement. I think, payer reimbursement needs to align with the care models for reimbursement for home care, outpatient care, AI tools, where we really are aligning incentives with reimbursement. And it's be a small step to what we've been trying for many years of kind of value-based care. But eventually, I think with all the technology tools and kind of this shift to outpatient, I think we will be able to affect the total cost of care, kind of affect patient safety, and ultimately affect outcome on a community basis, population basis. So I'm actually cautiously optimistic about the future. So.
Okay, well, thank you. And Adityo, I saved you for cleanup because you're working on extending healthy life and longevity. So I saved you for last here.
Hi, I will actually start by connecting some of the comments that were already made. Mathai mentioned how we do not have mechanistic view often in the actual healthcare delivery setting of how to treat patients, etc. To that point, when I think about the current estimate of the number of druggable proteins in our bodies, people estimate is about 10,000 something, say, between 10 and 11,000. And how many of these we can actually therapeutically target today with any kind of, therapeutic agent? It's about 600. When you think about the gap, 600 and whatever, 10,500, you realize we have a very, very long ways to go as humanity. And these are the levers that we need to be able to manage and control to be able to treat diseases. And we need to have the basic tools for that. And what I see is that we hope over the next 5 to 10 years, we make real progress towards, being able to precisely address more of these druggable targets or proteins inside our bodies. That then combines with the understanding, like Mary was talking about, of diseases. So far, we've had a disease model, which is simply, a silver bullet for a single protein. You give somebody something and it works. But as someone pointed out, that's not the case quite often with many diseases. It's, these are multifactorial diseases, and our understanding of the concert of different proteins involved in diseases will also evolve, hopefully. So when you have the right precise agents to address these, targets, along with the, increasing understanding of what are the combination of, targets that actually are involved in the particular disease manifestation in a patient, we will have dramatically better ways of intervening in any kind of disease process. But what I see is this is a process that will take a long time for us to achieve as humanity. But in the next 5 to 10 years, I hope to see tremendous progress in this direction, both from the ability to precisely target these things, whether it's just with new agents that we need, plus the delivery systems we were talking about, whether it's antibody drug conjugates and other things like those, you take it to the right place inside the body, but combine that with increasingly better understanding of disease processes that are, very, very mechanistic for specific patients. So that's where I see medicine going.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for starting off. Got a wide range of perceptions here. Before I go to questions from the audience, any of you panelists want to dig in a little further in what somebody else has been talking about, whether it's costs, drug development, remote surgery, healthcare delivery, any conflicts here? Anything that you guys disagree with or have different approaches? Anybody?
Hey, Paul, I spend most of my time on the device side, of course, so it's kind of inspiring to get back to the life sciences and the pharma side and see what everyone's doing here. And Matai, the first indication for our little robot is, colectomy, right? Colon resection surgery, right? And way downstream, second biggest killer. You mentioned IBDs as well. And so important to get upstream of this, right, with some therapies and things like that. And so I was just thinking, what are some of the techniques you guys think about in order to treat, the IBD or colorectal cancers and things like that? How do you see that all coming?
Yeah, so maybe 2 quick comments, John. So first is on the treatment side, on the medicine side, there are certain fundamental drivers of colon cancer. Like my own company, Parabolis, has identified one of those as a mutation in a pathway called the Wnt beta-catenin pathway. And it's as fundamental as androgen is to prostate cancer, but it's one of those difficult to drug spaces that our company hopes to change. The other comment to make that just supports what you're doing is a lot of what's super hard about colon cancer is that colonoscopies themselves are quite challenging, and they're very involved. And despite screening guidance right now in the country and in the world, very few people, a far too small number get screened because it's actually a big deal and it's expensive.
Yeah.
So having alternatives that are more accessible to patients of ways to tell what's going on in your GI tract is huge. And I could say the same thing about other gastrointestinal conditions. There's all sorts of things from gastroparesis to inflammatory bowel disease, which is more than one thing. And it's difficult without visualizing what's happening. It's not like our skin. So maybe what you're doing will offer technology that will help towards both precision medicine, but maybe in the near term, knowing that something's wrong with you in the first place.
Cool. Thank you.
Can I answer
Well-
like just in a conceptual way your question, John?
Yeah, please.
Like, let's say, because you're asking about IBD, let's say like you're talking about, okay, we are now in a future world and we are not limited by availability of data. And I absolutely agree, by the way, that the first thing that we're going to have an abundance of, as Jeff said, is omics. But let me zoom to a less realistic future where we actually have an abundance of imaging data. Let's just for a thought exercise, let's say you have a massive amount of CT enterography data or MRE, right? You've imaged these patients in a variety of ways, and you have data on a whole slew of patients that have various, they could be healthy, they could have different kinds of IBD. You have imaging data, you have omics data, you have genetic data. What you can do with machine learning and AI is you can first build a predictive model that says, okay, I can now predict some kind of patient state from a small amount of data and scale the data. The next thing you can do is you can take all of the data that you have and create a lower dimensional representation or embedding of all of those data, either one modality or multiple modalities, to learn healthy and disease state and to start to see things with AI in a way that you couldn't see them before. And you could align those things with genetics and then be in a world where you're now powered to say what kinds of genetics associate with these different states for the patient, and that could potentially lead you to a new way of thinking about intervention points in that disease. There are a lot of mental leaps that I made as I went through that, but that's also how you would think about a future world of trying to understand IBD and come up with different ways of treating it.
So
Matai knows a lot more than I do about this, so Matai.
let's stay on this though. So I was on the inflammatory bowel disease. I happen to have had Crohn's disease since I was 19. I've had 11 surgeries, John. My family has funded IBD centers of excellence. Let's stay on that one and get back to some of the things Minesh and Matai and Aditya were talking about. And it's not too far off from what Bill was talking about, although cancer is a bit of a different animal. But in it, there was a question that flashed through on what about prevention? All right. So when you think about inflammatory bowel disease, even though you have a better way, John, of perhaps doing surgery is an intervention you want to avoid.
Yeah.
And if there's a way to back up from surgery to something less invasive, you want to do that. Well, the way inflammatory bowel disease works is it's a combination of what's called the microbiome, what's in your gut, and how that bounces off the rest of the things in your body, your genome, and other things that might be going on in your bloodstream proteome. But basically, you have a failure in your mechanism to shut down your immune system at the right time to attack things going on in your digestive system. Just so everyone knows here, we haven't mapped the microbiome yet. It's way more complex than mapping human cells. There's like 10 to the 22nd more non-human cell type organisms in the body, in your digestive system, than there are human cell types, right? So, but, in the future, we're going to be able to map somebody's microbiome, and you might be able to, getting back to the bacteria and virus thing that Matai was talking about, you might be able to solve, we have all these sort of, I would call them false god proteomic probiotic and sort of things going on in the consumer industry today, but you'll be able to get specific information that says, if we introduce the right bacteria, the right virus, the right whatever, you can basically bring the system back into balance. And it might cost a couple bucks instead of thousands or tens of thousands.
So Jeff, if I can build on that, I think that's great aspiration. I'd really love to see better detection, earlier detection, because we know if we can intervene in a disease as it is going forward, you get a better outcome for the patient. So, from late stage intervention to early detection and intervention to prevention is probably the paradigm that I would see being pursued over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. But I think your objective is the right one. At the end of the day, if there are things that we can do that can predict and then prevent, that's going to be better for every person, and it's going to be better for the health economics outcome for our society as a whole. So I applaud that vision, but we're going to have to, it's going to be a while to get there, even with all the power of the computing world that we now have available to us.
I do have to jump in and comment because you mentioned something, Jeff, that's actually a long-term obsession of mine, and that is the microbiome. It's something we don't understand well, but like I work from a company called Sapient in San Diego, that's very deep and extensive profiling of small molecules in our blood shows that probably north of a third of the molecules floating around our blood are from the bacteria in our gut, from our microbiome. And some of them are fairly high concentrations, and probably there's a symbiotic relationship after long number of years of co-development that is a completely mysterious area for us. So, there are probably subsets of what we call Crohn's disease and other gastrointestinal disorders that are caused by disturbances in those organisms. And it's a whole field. And right now, one problem with it is there's not the equivalent of single cell sequencing for bacteria. It doesn't exist yet. It's a technology advance that's probably needed. And so it's not clear how to characterize those. You take them out of the gut, you start sequencing them in bulk, you lose all the ones that are obligate anaerobes, the ones that will just die if there's oxygen around. And so it's a very challenging thing to do. And there are technical advances probably that will blow open that field. But there's no question the field is important.
So I've noticed something that's missing in this conversation, which may be taken for granted, but my own outsider observation is I've seen probably the most funding of AI initiatives is in the healthcare sector. And I haven't heard anyone mention it. And I know it's baked into a good number of the initiatives, but what is the role of AI that you guys see and that will really help drive or is overhyped? What are the biggest impacts? I'll start with you, Manesh, because you actually have AI in your company name, Hippocratic AI. So
yeah, so I think that I think generative AI and AI in general is here to stay in our healthcare delivery model, and I think that's, to be honest, the only tractable solution right in our current state to kind of achieve the outcomes that we want to achieve. And it all kind of ties together with a lot of the discussion that we've had, right? Like currently our healthcare system is designed such that we intervene in late stages of illness, and so we don't have the resources to intervene early on where we can truly affect kind of the long-term outcome. And so, when you look at disease states such as outside of cancer, but when you look at like congestive heart failure, chronic kidney disease, we are able to intervene with humans on the top few percent of the sickest of the sick, and we try to change their use of health, we try to intensively manage them kind of on the outpatient basis so we can decrease their total cost of care. But we're not intervening on the other 95 to 97% of patients because we don't have a way to do that. And I think now AI and specifically generative AI has given us that tool. We now have a tool where we can actually effectively intervene with patients way down the illness kind of stack and prevent the kind of the rising risk. And so I think that generative AI and AI and machine learning is here to stay across a variety of different types of use cases. Both on the kind of just the efficiency side, like we talked about earlier, but actually on the health delivery side. So I don't think that it's hype. I think that out of all these use cases that are out there now, I think we will obviously over the next few years, it'll narrow down to a couple kind of larger applications. But I do think it is an effective way to kind of to bridge this gap that is, up till now has just been widening in the delivery space.
Aditya, what's your perspective?
Obviously, like Minesh said, it is here to stay. It's a big part of everything that gets done from here on. But there is also a lot of misunderstanding and hype. People think if you just heap piles and piles of data, not the practitioners on this panel, but the general perception is that you just heap random data at something, it actually helps. It doesn't, because if you add disparate, random, different data along different axes, you get killed by the curse of dimensionality. The amount of data you need exponentially go up to actually be able to make sense of it. So AI, there is a lot of misunderstanding behind it, what it's actually useful for and what it's good for, and where it's not. And there are too many settings where we don't have what would qualify as truly big data. You have all these settings where you have small, sparse data sets, and typical deep learning tools don't work very well. So we, for instance, had to build completely new types of neural network technology that work better in these kinds of settings, which is quite common in many life science applications. And so there are these kinds of problems. There is actually a recent book that came out called by two AI researchers, one Princeton prof, called AI Snake Oil. And they did a very, very good job. And I think Eric Topol has a YouTube segment on it, for instance. I would recommend that everybody watch it, where they show all these cases of, using quote unquote predictive AI or classification problems where, it looks good in the training setting, but then when you apply it, it's actually terrible, and people don't understand that. And it's been even rolled out in clinical settings by Epic and others, and after years of being in that setting, people sort of start finding out, okay, the King's New Clothes situation where it doesn't really work. So
can I step in here? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just talking to the SVP of GE Healthcare. She is in charge of data at GE Healthcare, and we agreed that AI is a great feature. It is a great tool if the data set is large enough and if it is programmed correctly. But at the end of the day, it is a feature and it is a tool. And we have to all look at it like that. It's gotten a lot of hype, and there's we hear a lot about it in the news. But the way we need to use it is to make sure that our data sets are clean enough and large enough to be able to utilize it, and that we don't utilize it to the disadvantages of the other features in our products.
Here, you're indeed correct.
Yeah.
And this has been a problem of misunderstanding what it's good for and what it's not good for, and it is indeed a tool which has specific use and utility in settings, but people need to be able to understand it for what it is.
Right.
Yeah, I think one thing, just to piggyback on that, is that I think a lot of folks focus on just the data that goes in, and if you have good data going in, you're going to get good data coming out or good outputs. And well, we've actually focused on output testing. So we've done most of our testing has been focused on what are the outputs in clinical environments, and having human clinicians kind of evaluate the outputs to make sure we know the data is clean, but nonetheless the outputs in these generative models are not always predictable. And so we've done most of our testing has been done on the output side, actually, to ensure that they're clinically efficacious and safe.
So Paul, I didn't mention AI very specifically because I'm an AI curmudgeon. If you sat 30 years ago in a healthcare panel, it sounds a lot like today. If you are an information technologist like I am, and you're talking about AI, it sounds a lot like today, 30 years ago. What's the difference? What's the difference is the generative piece of AI, which means basically you can have something conversational kick back at you or engage you. That's not just a if-then algorithm, but it actually generates the content, it generates the expression, it might generate the answers or so forth. But understand, AI, the way it's kind of making its way into the market now is it's a statistical technology, okay? It's based on probabilistic things. And it is inherently regresses to the mean. And what I mean by that is, like, if we wanted to take the writing skills of everyone on this thing and we all entered writing samples and you had AI look at it, the output of that would not be the best writer here. It would be the mean. It would be the average writer here. And it would probably hallucinate in addition to being an average writer, right? So one of the things I just want to say is, before we get too excited about AI, we can't even process the data in healthcare today conventionally yet. When we talk about bouncing the microbiome data we just talked about off of the genome, we can't do it. There's not enough compute power or enough ways to store the data in a standardized way to even do that yet. And so while everyone's talking about AI, what they really should be talking about is how we store data non-binary and how we do quantum computing instead of binary computing, because we don't have these chips that NVIDIA are developing are not solving the problem that we have with big data in healthcare. So I think what I tell my folks at Blackstone, who listen to me as a senior advisor, is I said the next range of great investments is going to be the death field of AI failures and getting back to basics and picking up the things that we have to do in healthcare, like lower the costs and be more efficient on transaction process.
So,
Jeff, if I can jump in, I actually disagree with a bunch of that, but agree with a bunch too. The parts I disagree with is there have been, first, let me just step back and say, technologies as they've kind of come over the years, if deployed correctly, can revolutionize science and understanding, right? And so this as a technology is very much multifaceted and is probably going to be in many areas. The positive example that you could not do just from averaging is prediction of protein structure. And it was the Nobel Prize just awarded a couple of weeks ago for the use of AlphaFold in predicting protein structure, which has made a fundamental difference to how those interested in proteins and drug discovery do their work. Right now, you can get a prediction. That's been a problem that's been on the table for many decades. I've had the chance to think about that actually like decades ago. So that's something that could not have arisen if not for particular advances in machine learning. And there are numerous examples like that. It's not about email drafting. And I think that companies, like when you advise Blackstone, I think I would agree with you that companies that their entire raison d'etre is AI, and there's not like a domain insight and there's not other things that they're actually doing, I think that's a little bit suspicious. But that all companies don't use some aspect of AI. I don't see that as reality either. I think all companies will use some manifestation of what is broadly and probably poorly defined as AI, both predictive and generative systems. That'll just be a reality for, I think, 100% of companies going forward. If they don't, they're not using, they're not using the tools that are available around them adequately.
So I will add something to that. Makai, you're absolutely correct. AI, as I said, is here to stay and it'll be used. It's a question of people understanding when and where it's good and where it's not. And as for the comment about not having enough storage capability for collecting and analyzing the data, I actually disagree with that, because storage is cheap and we can collect tons and tons of data. The question is it data that's properly structured for use? Okay, and how are we then analyzing it? Okay, going back to microbiome data, yes, there needs to be some fundamental advancements in technology, from detection to all kinds of things, for us to be able to really collect everything that's involved there. One thing I wanted to throw out for the panel's consideration is what you guys think. People have been talking about these smart pills for a while. What if we could actually ingest a bunch of these smart pills as additional sensors that, so it makes, and then external sensors that talk to them to be able to collect, in vivo, a whole bunch of information. Let's say even some kind of Raman spectroscopy or other kinds of data, so that and it'll be hugely noisy, incredibly messy, but then doing the right AI-driven analysis, doing the right lower dimensional embedding that Mary was talking about, we may be able to say, okay, these are the signatures that are most important. I think some of those kinds of things are pretty exciting, that can actually change our understanding of some of these disease processes. Ultimately, it could be many different bacteria in our gut producing something, but it may be some specific molecular signatures of the kinds of small molecules that they produce, some polysaccharide A or whatever else, that are the key drivers for various processes. We need to be able to sort out, from that data, what those signatures are.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I can add here. I mean, we started the conversation asking what will the world look like 10 years from now? So let's go back and let's talk about what the world actually looks like today. So I agree with the counters and agreements that both Matai and Adityo had for you, Jeff. But I think some really important things to clarify, specifically regarding advancements in compute and advancements in models. So the idea that today's compute is actually energetically limited, meaning that literally the way that the electrons move up and down in these chips is the thing that's going to be limiting, and therefore we need to go to quantum computing, is correct if you're talking about building and training large language models of the type that OpenAI or Safe Superintelligence or other companies in that sector are attempting to do, right? The next better version of ChatGPT. What we have been talking about on this call in the realm of biologic data, for the very reasons everybody has stated, which is we don't have that much of it, they're actually not those models. They're not large, they're not language. They're kind of only models, right? And so that's the thing that they have in common. And the technologies that make those models, like neural network, machine learning models, tensor models with attention, all these things that have happened literally in the past decade and have led to the generative AI field being relevant on biologic data, those are very, very important changes that have happened that, when combined with the vast availability of GPUs at affordable levels now that are available to companies, really meaningfully expand what we can do with these approaches to address specific problems in healthcare. I think where we run into problems as an industry is A, when we blur what does 10 years from now look like, and then think people are talking about today. And B, and this has been a point made by multiple people, you have to be specific about the problem that you're trying to solve. Identify the problem that you're trying to solve. Figure out what data you need to do that. Figure out what models you need to do that, and get the right people to do those models. Be rigorous, have checks along the way, be transparent about the work you are doing. And only if you work in that kind of responsible way with these technologies do you have a chance of actually making an impact on whatever part of the healthcare system you're trying to impact. I know Manish is thinking about that all the time. How do I do this piece of it the right and responsible way that is safe for patients? And we think about that too, but the problems that we're trying to solve are vastly different. So we need different data, different models, and different people to solve them.
So, by the way, I agree with all the comments. I'm a big believer in machine learning. I don't consider that AI. I've written some chapters and things. Machine learning, I agree, produces wonderful insights, right? But jumping to this concept of generative AI and large language models, let's take a practical thing in healthcare. Minesh, you could talk about this, and there's players out there, but AI, when it was originally conceived, not the way Microsoft markets it. This is really important because everyone's getting caught up in a marketing scheme right now of the definition of AI. But AI was in the concept of expert system, which said if you took an expert at something that could not be scaled as a human or an individual, and you could replicate the judgment and experience of that highly knowledgeable person and scale that's your ultimate expression of AI. And of course, the holy grail on that expression of AI in healthcare is the physician being extended, amplified, replicated, if you will, in terms of artificial intelligence, being able to do what physicians are able to do, and hopefully what the best physicians or the best specialists or the best primary care physicians are able to do. Okay, that is a very different way of thinking about AI than large language models. And I just think we have to reconcile some of our definitional phrases before everyone gets caught up in the hype. So
let me transition here if I can, because there's a good number of people, as Jeff mentioned, that are actually concerned with the cost. We're talking an awful lot about the advancements in science and technology to do amazing things to cure cancer and going surgery and remote clinics around the world and all those things, which are amazing. How do we, what are the thoughts of how do we actually start to reduce costs at the same time as improving outcomes? How do we make it more affordable for employers, employees, people, access to care, everything else? Who's Ditcho, you're smiling. What would you do? Do you see a solution to that?
So this is what I have to say about it. Okay, AI, as we're discussing on this panel, has the potential to really change how effectively we do diagnostics, to treatment plans, be able to lower the personnel burden, in healthcare delivery, all those kinds of things. Minesh has been talking about it. This is all great, but whether it'll, even if it makes it more efficient in healthcare delivery, whether it'll reduce costs, has one other lever involved, and that one AI can't help us with, which is basically human greed. We have, in the system, we have a very, very convoluted system for healthcare delivery. It's designed that way for a reason, where lots of middlemen take huge cuts in the ultimate, product we give to patients. Okay, and it's not clear even with all the efficiencies we can deliver to the system, whether that'll really, truly, meaningfully lower costs, and that has to do with the various vested interests involved.
Well, how do we reduce costs?
if you're training an AI model today, but we can get off the AI thing. 80% of costs in healthcare are driven by mental health, social health, financial health, and purpose, not clinical stuff, not your genetics, not your genome, not your so you have to develop a system. If you're an employer, you want to have a benefit plan that just doesn't do sick care or clinical care, but you want to have a benefit plan that has the dimensions of mental health, both high acuity and low acuity, you know, like things like resilience and so forth. Social health in terms of helping people understand how to manage or be in the right relationships and be in the right cohorts of people that have a positive influence on them, right? You want to make sure that they have financial literacy. And if you solve those things, you're going to lower the cost of healthcare. You can't do it on the clinical side.
So Jeff, interesting, just to piggyback a little bit on that, what you're saying though is I think I'm on board with you that these generative models are not ready for physician diagnostic work, right? I mean, they're not fully deterministic, but I think the other things that you just mentioned that I think we all agree does ultimately affect health outcomes and the cost of care. You know, generative technologies are actually a wonderful solution for many of those. Now, the one that I would take exception to is the high acuity mental health interventions. I think those generative technologies are probably not the right solution for, right? Because there are subtleties that you have to recognize with patients that are on the edge. But I think for low acuity, for financial, for weight management, health, for lifestyle management, generative technologies are the perfect solution for those kind of things. And I think what I think we can all agree on is that these tools are some of them are great, but you do have to know the appropriate use. And then more importantly, you have to know when it's not appropriate to use technologies for certain interventions. And I think the high acuity mental health is a perfect example that I'm not sure there's any technology that we could substitute currently for a human intervening on patients that are at the brink of a mental health crisis.
You can triage people into high acuity virtual care using technology, but you're right, you can't replace it. I agree with you.
Any other approaches?
It's like
I'll tell you what. Go ahead, Matai.
Yeah, just to, I mean, it's such a daunting problem and question, Paul. Like in this country, I still attribute it to like anyone that's been in hospitals and through the hospital system will recognize how many businesses are profitable businesses that are kind of squeezed as middle people all along the way. And that's a giant self-reinforcing system, not to be cynical about it. But you know, like acetaminophen cost a hospital about 1 cent, but cost the patient, what they bill the patient is $15 for a tablet. A bandage is 5 cents, but they bill a lot more than that because there's all these systems that exist that have come to be because they're third-party payers effectively for the system. If you go to other exceptional healthcare hospitals, like say in Singapore, you know, you'll see that the cost of same procedures are sometimes an order or two of magnitude less for the exact same care. In fact, probably like in some cases better care, because these middle companies don't exist. So it's something that you ask as a, there's not like a simple answer for this because it's one of those systems that it's self-reinforcing. So unless someone really like goes at this at a holistic level, it's very challenging to understand how to contain costs in the United States because it's not just like a medicine or a procedure or any, it's the totality of the system.
I want to echo what Matai just said and maybe give a different filter to it as well. We have probably one of the world's most complicated healthcare delivery systems that exists, and it's built up over many, many years with many, many different government interventions that are trying to make things better or more transparent or whatever. The thing that won't work to reduce the cost of healthcare is to have it politicized. And frankly, it is politicized on the left and the right in ways that do not allow for constructive policy-oriented dialogue in Washington, in the states, in the public square. And so I think, you know, we need to, if we could all take a whiteboard and say, we're going to design a new healthcare system, it would look nothing like what we have today. As a matter of fact, Matai is probably right that a Singaporean model may be a better way for us to be thinking about the delivery of healthcare on a per patient and a societal basis. But you know, from my perspective, we need to have sober conversations about what we are trying to do, how we can afford to pay for it, and not devolve to bumper stickers that cast aspersions at one group or another. We have the world's, I would argue, leading healthcare system for our population, and we have to find ways to make that more cost effective, better from a long-term sustainability standpoint, without really destroying critical elements of the system along the way. It's a long conversation. It's a difficult conversation, but we have to start having it, and not in the polemic fashion that we've had it over the last 5 to 10 years.
So, Bill, how do you do that when there are so many special interests that are protecting all these middlemen, which is what I was talking about, this human greed that, you know, gets in the way, that is not going to let us move from the current really uncomfortable local minimum we're sitting in, when there is probably a global minimum that's much, much better, where we could get to if we could get past, you know, these things. And the unfortunate problem is that we have industry groups with huge lobbying power that, you know, control the political dialogue on what is possible and what's not, you know, and nobody's allowed to go to the whiteboard and, you know, design something from scratch. You know, it's so in my opinion, the way I see it, healthcare delivery is a problem of such, you know, an order of magnitude greater dysfunction than anything we were talking about on the medicine development and understanding disease side, where we have we can control what we do there. You know, it's not, you know, dictated by some complicated morass of bureaucracy and vested interests in between.
So I wish, sorry, Paul, let me just add one more thought. I wish I had a magic wand and could figure out how to do what you're asking us to do. But I do think that if we identify the problem, I think we'd agree there is a problem. Then we have to actually study the problem and understand what the alternatives are. And then we have to build the political will to actually change the system. I think we throw up our hands and don't do anything. We point at one element of the system and ignore other elements. We're not trying to address this holistically. And I think we're smart enough to be able to do that, but we have to understand this is a multi-year process, and it requires everybody to be engaged in it on a serious, thoughtful policy basis. And, you know, if we don't start, and maybe there's some national task force that starts to address all of this, but we have to look at it seriously, because we're really poking at individual problems, which may be right to poke at, but, you know, it's like whack-a-mole. You whack one mole down and the next one pops up. So there has to be a more holistic approach. That's what I would advocate for. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to actually make that all happen, but that's what I would aspire to.
Okay, well, we are just at the just a few minutes left here, and I would like to just end up the panel conversation just by asking each of you, of all the things, whether you're working on or somebody else is working on, or the history of the whole ecosystem of health and healthcare, what is the thing that you're most optimistic about, most excited about, and whether it's in advances in curing diseases, or it's diagnostics, precision medicine, health services and provisions, lowering costs, anything that you are most optimistic and believe you are excited about seeing. So Aditya, you went last, so this time go first. Just really quickly, less than a minute, okay? What are you most
I'm
excited?
really excited about, in the next 5 to 10 years, again, the exponential increase, hopefully, in our understanding of disease processes and being able to intervene in them with a whole large steady stream of new medicines with dramatically better, therapeutic profiles than what we've had so far.
Okay, thank you. John, what are you most excited about?
Oh, we're going to keep advancing on the device side and things like this. But today I really, really enjoyed just looking at these novel approaches and techniques for the therapy breakthroughs on the pharma side and things like this. So that it's really cool to see these things kind of go in parallel. So there's a lot of exciting stuff on the therapy front, I think.
All right, thank you. Mary?
Thought-provoking discussion. I think I'm really, really excited that over the next little while, we are going to help some of the skeptics see that the computational approaches that we have today are going to be very, very useful and impactful for us as a society and our understanding of disease, and us as an industry and our ability to impact patients. So I think the next few years will call a lot of people to task and also create opportunities for the people who are doing the right work in the right way to win over the skeptics.
Jeff, what excites you?
So I'm completely optimistic. Again, the book I published most recently, not just in sickness, but also in health, says that when you as employers, you as CEOs out there, when you insist that your benefit plans cover physical health, including fitness and nutrition, not just clinical health, mental health, social health, financial well-being, and understand that your people need to find a purpose, that's harder for you to do, is that we will improve the health status of people. We will lower the cost of healthcare. It isn't political, it's accepted bipartisan, and we're not as far away from that as people think. So it's going to happen, and I think it's going to actually happen in this 5-year time frame, that becomes the way that your standard benefit plans look.
All right, thank you. Manish?
Yeah, I think, I'm most excited, I think, about how, all this technology that we've talked about will kind of help us enable over the next few years kind of healthcare access and kind of close the gap on health equity. And so I think there's a real opportunity to do that.
All right, spoken as an optimistic physician. All right,
Yeah.
so thank you. Bill?
I guess for me, the thing that I'm most hopeful about is the increasing ability to detect disease at earlier disease states. Because if we can detect disease early, we have tools, and we will develop other tools, medicines, procedures, interventional techniques that can actually hold the disease at bay and perhaps even reverse the disease. So early detection is so fundamental to so many different diseases. And I think where we were 10 years ago and where we're going to be 10 years from now are going to be light years difference. So that would be what I would hope for.
All right, Matai?
I'm going to give an optimistic view in the next 2 years or 3 years that hasn't come up yet, really, except when we mention large language models. There's a huge disconnect between the sort of the understanding of a patient that's in a major healthcare center, like a city and going to a big hospital, compared to probably 95% of people that don't go to that particular hospital. And I think of large language models, and I do a lot of personal time helping people navigate systems and understanding what's wrong with them, where if they were in a different circumstance, they would easily understand. So these large language models, to me, in the very near term, are going to be revolutionary for people that embrace them, which can be everybody, in helping even understand what to do and instructions as to what to do, understanding what tests may be needed to understand what's wrong with them. Closing a gap, that's a huge gap between those that are going to these elite centers and probably the rest of the country and the world. So these large language models, and I know Janet Woodcock is particularly passionate about this project idea as well, and she's trying to raise money around this. I'm not sure it's as much a business idea as just full embracing of the systems that have been created for us through AI.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. It's been a great conversation and discussion. Prior to founding the Alliance, I spent 3 years leading a respiratory company, and where I had the opportunity to experience and understand just how dysfunctional the structure of our U.S. healthcare industry and insurance areas, and so we have a real challenge ahead of us. But the opportunities of innovation of leaders like these folks is incredible, and I am optimistic that I work with leaders because leaders take action, and just a small group of people that are committed to making change can affect change. So I'm an optimist. So thank you. We're at the end of the panel conversation, and we are going to break into smaller groups where you can engage with other leaders on this call, discuss your own personal opinions and questions, and make connections as well. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Come on back, and we'll be in our private groups so we can engage with each other. So thank you all for attending, and let's go out there and make a difference.